Okay, this isn't really a review, but I still wanted to talk about this album. And we're going to do it in a different and cool way. So as you can tell by the title, we are going to be talking about the album Warfaring Strangers' Darkscorch Canticles, which is a compilation of obscure rock music from the 60s and 70s from bands that basically disappeared. And if you know me, you know that falls right into my line of music that I love. Because I love obscure music, I love weird shit, I love stuff that's basically like one and done and disappeared. It's amazing. So a lot of obscure albums from this time can go for a lot of money, depending on if it's a first press or in some cases the only pressing of an album. Sometimes it's in the couple hundreds, sometimes it's in the thousands, sometimes it's in the 10,000s if you get to certain special ones that are private presses. But in this case, this is a compilation that's readily available online, CD, and in vinyl formats. But I thought to myself, how much would it cost for me to basically make this album just using the original singles? So that's what we're going to try today. I don't know what it's going to be called, but it'll be fun. For this, I will be using Discogs median section to calculate the prices, and using first pressings of any singles released. And then there's going to be some exceptions here and there, and you'll see why. First up is 12 O'Clock Sataniel by the group Air, originally released in 1972, with the B-side being Jump Back. Now this would be one of their only 2 songs recorded, with only 500 copies pressed, and no other pressings of this being made as of right now. It might be tough to find this one, and if you do, the average you'd be about ready to spend is about $175. Now we got Warlord by Wrath, released in 1975 as a B-side to the other side being Rock and Roll Fever. There is no real info on how many were made, and I even double-checked the booklet because I have the CD on hand and I was able to go through it, and I did a double-check right before this video even. And this is the only pressing made according to Discogs, and if you want one, it'll run you about $411. Now we got King of the Golden Hall by Stonehenge, released in 1971 as a B-side to the single Inferno. And the booklet says that there were about 200 total pressed, so very limited. And if you want it, it'll run you about $500. Next is the track Sealed and Engraved by Triton Warrior. This is a B-side to the single Satan's Train. Now this had 2 different first presses, and we're going to talk about that right now just to clear it up. The first one was in 1972, and it's a one-of-a-kind acetate that was later re-released publicly as the actual 7-inch. And that was in 1973. And the book says, I double-checked, I think it was like 2,000 copies pressed of this one. It might be 200. I did double-check, so if it is wrong, I'll do a triple-check, and it'll be right here. But I saw 2,000, and there is no price for this one, because no one has sold or is selling the single. If I'm correct, this is the one that did have a repress later on, as did a couple of other ones on here. Sorcerer by Junction is the next one, released in 1973, and is the A-side single, with the B-side being 4 Sticks. With only a few hundred copies made, might be really hard to find this one, especially with only 3 sales total, and it averaging around 300. There is one for sale right now, but it'll cost you about $850. And honestly, I think that is a bit high for this one. It's a good song, but damn, for a very good plus condition single, that's up there. Especially when the one for $675 on the high end sold in excellent condition. Now we got one of my favorite tracks on here, Slave of Fear by Stone Axe. Released in 1971 with the B-side being Snakebite, only 500 copies of this were pressed that I could find. And it was their only release as the band, and what's crazy is, yet again, no sales. It's really odd. But there is no price for this one, unfortunately, as well. But there is a re-release from Spain in 2022, and it is fairly cheap if you want to find that. I think it runs about maybe 20, maybe 30 bucks. So still for a single, especially a more modern one, yeah, it's a bit much, but especially when you cannot even find a copy of the original, I would take that any day. Next is Seance by Wizard, which is the first one here that was not released as a single but pulled from their album, The Original Wizard, in 1971. For this, we're gonna do a fun trick. So we're gonna look at the average of the full album, which is $217 as of recording. It might have changed, oh well. But that's for a full 11-track album and not the single. To get an estimate on it, we're going to divide the full album price by 5, basically making it 5 singles with one left over, unless sometimes there's 3-track singles. I have a couple of them. So dividing it by 5, we get an average of $43 for this single. And I feel like that's a fair way to calculate this when it's already kind of a tough situation to figure out. Next, we got probably one of the more underrated tracks on this. It's basically a sleeper, because I didn't get onto it until about a month after listening. And I'm like, hey, this is actually pretty good. It is Tasmania by the group Stoned Mace, which is the B-side to the single C-147 from 1973. And this one is extremely weird because not only is the release date really not cataloged on it, it's on a record label called Mace Records, presumably their own self-released, and that only pressed that record, so it's like a one-off. But if you want to find it, it is one of the lower averages of an actual single, being about $75 right now. Now we got Black Death by Arrogance, which is another amazing track released in 1970 as the B-side to the song In Estimation. Surprisingly, the band, from what I could find on Discogs, stayed together for a long while, making several albums until the 80s, and then there's one from the 2000s, and then one in the 2010s as well. This is apparently their first known recording session, which is wild for one of their first tracks, because this is crazy for a first track. If you want the single, it'll run you about a nice $200, but good luck, because it seems in the past couple years, it's very scarce, and the only other one for sale is about $400. Next up is Song of Sauron, I'm hoping I'm saying that right, by Sonora, released in 1971 as the B-side to Don't Ever Leave, only a year before their breakup. Again, this says really not much information on it, but if you wanted, it's about an average of 300, with the most recent selling about December 2023. None are listed as of now, and it doesn't seem like it's one that people will press in the future, and it's on another one of these one-off record labels, so I don't know. Maybe Numero Group will pop in another 7-inch of it, we don't know. Spectre by Darkstar is up next with another amazing, gritty sound. It's pretty damn wild. And it's released in 1978, which is probably one of the later first presses of any of these on here. It was released as an A-side, with the B-side being Sound of the Sun. It is said there were about 1,000 made, so a bit more than a lot of the amounts we've been seeing on here, other than the 2001. But it is also more on the affordable side, with about a $90 average, but it is scarce, with the last one selling October of 2020. Next is Wizard King by Inside, which for some reason is like a guilty pleasure song, because while the quality isn't the best and it's a very odd song compared to the rest on here, it is so catchy and I cannot get it out of my head. Released in 1972 as an A-side, with the B-side being You Love My Love. We don't really have a lot of info on this one whatsoever on this record, other than when it was recorded, and that means another one with no price. Space Rock comes in next with their single Dark Days, with the B-side being Going Down the Road. This one with very little information other than that they were a 70s band. I did look into the booklet because it did tell me a lot more information. I do like that. So it's formed by George, I'm hoping I'm saying this right, George Biznov, 2 Bobs and a Jimmy. That's legit from the liner notes, because Biznov apparently could not remember their names, well, the last names of them. But that's what's in the notes. It was a self-release of only 500, and was pretty much either given door-to-door or to Biznov's bar patrons. Apparently there were about 20 songs that he had written for Space Rock, but only 2 of them that we have right now are recorded. So you never know, we might see Space Rock come back if they are still around. I am unsure if they had passed on or not, because it's been a while since that, but it's unlikely that we'll ever see anything from them again, and I highly doubt there will be any sales, because there has not been any lately. Now we got Black Wizard by Medusa, which is another weird one, because the whole entire album for Medusa was recorded in the 70s, but not released until 2013, as the album was basically shelved. We're going to do the same thing as Wizard, But since this is a more modern release, we're going to use the high end of the first press, because I think the average on it is like 20 bucks. And I think the high end is like a bit more. So we're going to cheat a little, but we're going to have fun with it. So the full album has about an $86 value. Divide that by 6, gives us about a $14 value for it being a single. Next one we got, I think, is really a big sleeper track on here, as well as Tasmania is, but this is one that's like, this is so good. It is Sweet Child by Gorgon Medusa, released in 1977 as the B-side to Situation. This has a price of about $179, which honestly, this should be more of an easier one to get, as there were several thousand made, and they're selling as recent as July 2023. That genuinely should have been the last track on the album, because it is so good, but the last one's also good. The last one for this album is Cry for the Newborn by Hellstorm, which is now the latest release here, as it was released as the B-side to It's My Turn to Take You in 1980. It was intended for their first album, which never came to be. Someone has one on Discogs, but I am unable to find it anywhere digitally. So if you know of it at all, I'll put it up here, the Discogs info for that album. Please reach out to me if you have it. I would love to hear it, to see what it was. This was released on a one-off record label, unknown pressings as of now. You can find it for about $305. Now we have a surprise. We have a little bonus now. There were exclusive songs added to the vinyl that will be added on as another part. First is the full vinyl exclusive Snake Bite by Stone Axe, which really doesn't add to the value, as it's paired with Slave of Fear, which also didn't have a price. Last is the single by Super Chief, and includes the songs Red Brained Woman and Animal Woman. These will be included as one price since it is the same single, originally released in the US and France in 1969. For a US pressing, it'll run you about $138. So now we get to the full price. If you were to buy all the singles from the basic CD digital album variant, it would run you about an average of $2,292. That also does take into consideration that some of the songs didn't have a price, so maybe they're about $50 to $100 a piece, we don't know. But $22.92 is our price for this. If you want to add the bonus tracks, it's $2,430. So you're looking at a pretty pricey album, honestly, that you can now have on CD and vinyl. It was released about 10 years ago, but that's still really cool that we have stuff like this. That's one thing I've grown to love about these types of compilations. I didn't like them at first, but now I do, because it saves a lot of these songs that would pretty much be lost to time if no one knew about them. That's why I like that the Numero group are doing. The people, I believe it's Finders Keepers Records, that put up the Susan Christie album Paint a Lady. The people that make the Brown Acid series, that one compilation that I got, Pale Shades of Grey. So it's like a lot of these kinds of albums that are just singles from wherever. I feel like they do so much help for preserving music in this community, because I would not have heard of any of these songs if it was not for finding that CD. But thank you everyone for tuning in. I really had fun doing this. I don't know how often these will be around. Maybe I'll do one once every other month or once a month, depending on how good this one does, because I already am kind of mixing up my content. So this is really cool. I don't know what I'm going to call it. Maybe like the real value or something like that. It'll be something cheesy, something funny. I don't know. But if you liked it, let me know down below. Like, comment, subscribe, share, do whatever. See you in the next one.